Access to Hawaii and California. Energy utility companies are admitting their roles in devastating wildfires in recent years. In this 6 on Your Side investigation, I asked energy companies in Nebraska and Iowa what they're doing to prevent similar catastrophes here.
A huge part of it for us is really the ongoing maintenance of our systems.
Upkeep of infrastructure is a daily duty for crews with Mid-American Energy Company in Iowa. But when the wind picks up or the ground dries out, taking caution to prevent sparking a fire becomes even more vital.
Whenever the National Weather Service is issuing a red flag warning, or we're seeing signs based on our own research that we need to make adjustments to how our crews are operating, we're doing that.
In these situations, Mid-American will not schedule services requiring welding unless it's an emergency. And if there is an outage, crews may hold off on using an automatic switch to restore power.
We will actually go out into the field and assess the situation. So the restoration might take a little bit longer, and that's because of those safety reasons and those extra precautions that we're putting in place.
Across the state line, Nebraska Public Power District takes similar precautions when these conditions arise. During red flag warnings, employees can't park their trucks on right-of-ways or smoke there. NPPD also works with authorities ahead of prescribed burns.
We have actually sprayed down poles before they started to burn or cleared vegetation. That was one of the things we learned, is go in and clear that vegetation around those poles so it can't burn.
Another line of defense is in the design of the equipment itself.
Storms do cause equipment to fall, no doubt about it, but we have very sensitive relaying on each end of that line that'll shut that line out if it goes to ground.
Walls says he regularly meets with other energy companies to discuss how they can collectively learn from incidents where utilities are at fault for starting fires. Though both NPPD and Mid-American say instances of their equipment starting a fire are very rare.
I will say that it's typically the other way around, where, maybe there is a field fire, for example, or a fire in a particular area that then is impacting our equipment.
Omaha Public Power District declined my interview request for this story, but they did give me a comment. It says they conduct regular inspections of their equipment, looking for signs of wear and tear or other issues caused by weather or animals. Last year, they replaced more than 3,500 structures. On Your Side in the studio tonight, I'm Erin Sullivan.